Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Prepare Your Best Application for Grad School. I'm Hillary Beggs, Director of Admissions for the Kroc School at the University of San Diego. Before we begin, I just have a few quick housekeeping items to share. First, as you can see, we are recording the session and we'll make it available online afterward. Second, we'll be keeping all attendees' microphones muted for the duration of our webinar. And finally, we really want to know what questions you have for our two panelists. So please feel free to use the chat box, send in your questions. I will copy and paste them and save them for the second half of our presentation. So while I introduce the presenters, please take a moment and introduce yourselves using the chat box with your name and where you are joining us from. We always like to see everyone around the world joining us. So I'm very pleased to introduce our two speakers for today's sessions, both of my colleagues here at the Kroc School. Please welcome Dr. Topher McDougall, Professor of Economic Development, and Frances Laviscount, the Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs. Welcome, both of you. So we will just go ahead and dive in. And again, please use that chat box and give us the rest of your questions. The first question I see a lot, I'll ask Topher this, is what makes a strong admissions application?
Hey, thanks, Hillary. So this is a question we get a lot, obviously. So for me, I've been on the admissions committee now for an undisclosed number of years, but it's greater than 12. For me, it's a strong application is really the product of a lot of factors, a number of factors that I think that Frances will likely talk about, but I think that they all boil down to this sort of fundamental proposition that you as the applicant have this extraordinary potential to incorporate all of these skills and the tools and the knowledge and the experience that you've gained already, the knowledge that we offer here, in order to launch yourself into this career of purpose and impact that leaves the world a sort of a more peaceful and more just, a more sustainable place than it was. And that kind of narrative package, the proposal that you are crafting into this narrative, I think oftentimes is oriented by a really strong problem solving sort of focus. I think that whereas if you are applying to a more standard cadre of graduate schools, you might have a more methodological focus. You might have research questions that are methodologically or originating, and here we really focus on more practical problems. It's a normative institution in that sense, and we're looking to make the world a better place. And like, what is a better place? What does that mean? How do we fit into it? In that sense, we're kind of constantly guided by this sort of trio of North Stars that I just mentioned: peace, justice, sustainability. And there are all sorts of tensions in there, and that's fine. They don't always go together at the same time. And part of our job here at a university is to hold those tensions and to sort of analyze the trade-offs between them. But if you can tell us a story about yourself and your capacities and your aptitudes and accomplishments and your drive and all of that, all of these things that oftentimes just get segmented into these bullet pointed lists on your CV. But if you can take those and weave them, all of these sort of data points together into a cogent narrative of potential, then we will definitely jump at the opportunity to bring you here.
Thank you. And that leads well into our next question, which I'll direct at Frances. How does the Kroc School approach admissions decisions?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm sure a lot of the folks on would like to know that. So the Kroc School approaches admissions decision with our mission in mind. And our mission is to equip and empower innovative change makers to shape a more peaceful and just society. So in order to achieve our mission, we sort of use a holistic review approach to admissions. That means that we evaluate applicants using a variety of methods, not just strictly GPA or GRE or the school you went to prior to coming to Kroc. We do believe in not relying on quantitative metrics only, It does not, it's not a really good indicator or predicator of student success, whether it's success as a graduate student or success after you graduate and you enter the field of peace building or social innovation or conflict resolution, or wherever you end up. In our recruiting admissions, we look for applicants from a wide variety of backgrounds, experiences, identities, and beliefs. Because we believe this because our field is very diverse. And we also believe that it is instrumental for a school such as ours, is critical to achieving our mission. In addition, the literature review is clear. A holistic approach to admissions can improve the learning environment, student engagement, teamwork, openness to new ideas, and other metrics for student success. So what does this all mean? It means that we look at the whole person. We look at all of you, right? Not just your test scores, not just your GPA. We look at your academic record in a wider context. We look at the maturity and sophistication of your admissions essay. We look for the applicant's aptitude to succeed in our graduate programs. Our programs are fun, they're creative, they're engaging, but they're also rigorous, they're challenging and can be very demanding. So we look for applicants who can thrive in this sort of environment. We also look at what led the applicant to apply to one of our degrees, right? Maybe there is an interest in one of your professors or professors here, like Professor McDougall's, his research, or there might be an interest in some of the programs that are run in our Institute of Peace and Justice. I think finally, we look at applicants' professional goals, right? Not everybody comes to graduate school knowing what they're going to do after, but many come here precisely to figure that out, right? We look for evidence that you have thoughtfully considered a career path in peace building or social innovation or conflict resolution, and what the potential for you to be successful after you graduate. So those are some of the things that we look for in an applicant.
Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful for everyone. I think this next one might also be helpful. Topher, what do you wish every applicant knew? And what are the common missteps you see in applications?
All right. So I think there are a number of parts to this. So I'm going to try to break this down a little bit. Let's start with the personal statement, because I think that the personal statement it's really the mechanism, it's the vehicle by which we create and craft these narratives that I was talking about in my first response. So, right, this is your chance to pull all of these various components of your application into a context. We're going to be seeing all of these documents, these secondary documents, but this is this is the way that we are going to be able to, the lens through which you want us to view all of these secondary documents, right? So this is your chance to articulate that narrative. So, like, for instance, we once got this super cool, top-notch application from this really smart, accomplished, driven woman who had professional experience. I think that she had a degree, an undergrad degree in biological anthropology, maybe, and then had gone on to get field experience in ancient Mayan archaeological excavation sites, studying evidence of violence, so sacrifice and war. And at first we sort of like raised our eyebrows at her CV. You know, it didn't quite make sense because we're dealing with violence today, not necessarily violence, you know, during the, like, I don't know, the downfall of the classic Maya or whatever. But her personal statement just made this truly exceptional case for this application, right? The application of these forensic archaeological techniques to modern day sites of mass atrocities. And she wanted to put these to use for the International Criminal Court in The Hague in cases, you know, like say Chechnya or Bosnia or, you know, wherever it might be. Say like today, you might say the Ukraine. So we were like, you know, brilliant. And we, you know, we accepted her. So she's on board. She's actually not on board anymore. She's graduated, but she came through the program and she's wonderful. So, okay, so number one, in terms of personal statement, you definitely need to respond to the prompts. We have these 4 prompts there. Respond to them. We asked the questions for a reason. We didn't just have this, this sort of standard grad school question about like, tell us about yourself and, your dog and your, cycling hobby or whatever it is, for a reason, right? Like we don't want you to just cram that generic personal statement made for some other grad school into these 4 discrete prompts. It's really obvious when an applicant isn't actually addressing the questions. So in a way, like the application is your first taste of what the Kroc School is all about, right? We're not going to ask you to submit that generic statement about how awesome you are and what your interests are. We are going to ask you to identify an important problem, like what is its amplitude and its related harms, the population that affects, why it's important, and then to analyze why it still exists, given all of that. Like if it's so important and so many people have presumably made or are making these ongoing efforts to solve it, and it's still there, that tells us something about perhaps the origins, the etiology, the rationale of the problem, the sustainability of that problem. Like when we talk about sustainability of the solution, we also want to think about the sustainability of the problem, right? Then we'll ask you like what sets you on your career path to becoming who you are, what you want to be, and then why the Kroc School is the place for you to blossom into that person. And I guess I think it's important. Oftentimes people will, I think, take the last prompt to tell us about why the Kroc School is so awesome, which is wonderful. I love hearing about why we're so awesome, but it's not really helpful to hear about what we can do for you or what is so attractive to you about this program. It's much more interesting for us to hear how you're going to take what we have to offer and catapult yourself into a more effective, career of impact. Okay. Secondly, the craft it with care. The statement, like you should read it and then proofread it and reproofread it and edit it and amend it and revise it and have someone else look over it to see if you're actually conveying what you think you are conveying. Because if there's sloppy work, that really stands out. The faulty diction or bad syntax or bad grammar or even just typos, it makes this sort of lastingly bad impression that stands out from all of the other ones. And that sort of poorly copy edited work is sort of seen as a proxy for poorly content edited work. Let's see. The other pieces of the application are also very important. And I'll just take one as an example, the letters of recommendation. You need to take those seriously and line up your references ahead of time. It's like get relevant letters of recommendation. Get it from a superior or a mentor, ideally at least 1 or 2 from a professor, depending on your experience. Like if you're a recent graduate, it should probably be 2 from professors, and maybe just 1 would be acceptable for those of you who've been out of school and in work for a while. 3 is always welcome, by the way. So like it's not a problem to pile on the letters of recommendation. Do not choose some random non-supervisory colleague or friend. Those hold very little weight. And it's so odd to me when we sometimes receive these applications where someone's like, here's my friend. And like, my friend tells me that I'm awesome and it doesn't mean anything. Let's see. I think that it would be it's a huge boost to any application if the recommendation is coming from someone well-known or relevant in some sort of related field, or perhaps who works with or has worked with some of one of the members of the admission committee. So yeah, don't make your selection based on who's easiest for you to ask, but like who's the best person to write this letter for the school, and be frank with them about whether they can write you a decent letter, because right, like if you're only giving 2 letters of recommendation and you're the one selecting them, we're not going out and like getting some representative sample of all the people you've worked with. But if one of those turns out to be sort of lukewarm or in some situations even negative, then that sort of calls into question a lot of things, right? Make them substantive. I think there's like a certain quality to an impersonal letter of recommendation that admissions committee members always can recognize. Like I've written those before, right? But it's the ones where that are really tailor-made for that applicant, that you can tell that as someone who's read a lot and written a lot of recommendation letters. You can tell that it's more impactful when it's really about that person, rather than just sort of subbing out like in a Mad Lib style. Like here's, I'm going to sub out amazing for a sort of slightly less, effulgent adjective. Yeah, insightful. We want insights about you. We want the letters not just to underline everything you've already told us, but sort of maybe give us a new point of view on what you're bringing to the table. And then lastly, I'll just say a word on academic aptitude. I know I've been talking for a little while, I'm sorry. But we do care about grades. We don't have GRE. We got rid of the GRE requirement for a reason. But we do care about grades. We do care about your academic aptitude here. And if you have a cumulative GPA of less than 3.0, it's really unlikely that we're going to admit you. There are other factors that play into our consideration. For instance, we do respect lower GPAs if you have taken really difficult and challenging courses, rather than just, you got a higher GPA, but it was built on really sort of fluffy foundations, courses that were entirely geared towards your wheelhouse and all of your proclivities and So we want to be able to reward academic bravery in that sense. But yeah, in the case of poor performance, you really should consider writing a supplemental letter that would detail the reasons for those poor grades. And again, try to weave that into your personal trajectory. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And this one, I think everybody always wonders, looking at grad school, it's an investment. And, some schools do offer scholarships. So Francis, maybe you can explain at least how the Kroc School goes through that scholarship process.
Yeah, happy to do that, Hillary. Yeah, and financing your graduate education is always a big decision. So the Kroc School and the University of San Diego, we offer a mix of discounts, merit-based scholarships, and need-based grants. So in terms of applying for a scholarship, once you've completed your application, you will be sent information how to apply for one of our scholarships, right? And let me just kind of review some of the terms to clarify the various awards that we offer. So in terms of tuition discounts, so for applicants from an Ashoka Changemaker campus, Hillary's going to drop the link so you can take a look at that at your leisure. Or if you're a member of the clergy, you're a returning Peace Corps volunteer, or you are, law enforcement professional, or you're a AmeriCorps alumni, there's special discounts for you. And just going back to the Ashoka, I just want to highlight that a little bit. So as you can see, or you will see once you've had a chance to look at the link, click through to the link, that USD is a proud Changemaker campus. We are part of the Ashoka network, and all the campus that you see there are part of that. So if you went to one of those schools, you qualify for a discount. We also offer the Dean's Merit Scholarship, and those are awarded based on some of the materials that you submit with your application. So you'll be considered for those as well. And then there are a number of external scholarships and awards that we offer, sort of like private funding from donors. Those include like the Rotary Scholarship, the Wasson Social Innovation Scholarship, the Jerry Bush Scholarship, and on and on and on. You can find a full list on our website, so I encourage you to look at that. And lastly, there's sort of like, the need-based financial aid, right? We've all done this, completed a FAFSA application. So we encourage you to do that as early as possible. Note that it's separate from any, merit award that you may receive. So again, it's a free application, that allows the government and USD to determine your eligibility for a need-based aid. And there's also, you can consider, student loans and grants, those are also options for you to consider as well.
Thank you so much. And I do want to clarify, in the United States, for any non-domestic students, prospective applicants in the webinar, only American residents are eligible in the United States to apply for that need-based award. So if you are an international student studying in the United States looking for scholarships, you'll be focusing on merit awards only. So that's one caveat. Okay, so please, this is our second half of the webinar. This is your time to use that chat box and ask some questions. I do have some that were sent in advance from attendees. I can go ahead and start with those, but please use that chat box. And these two experts are here for your information and your assistance. So somebody asked that they are graduating with their bachelor's degree and they're applying without a lot of work experience. So how can they address that weakness in their application? Topher, what do you think?
That's a great question. Yeah, so typically this is a field that attracts people who have been, well, in the field, in that proverbial field, wherever that field is. I always think about people just standing in a field, but we typically attract people who have been working somewhere and have observed something that didn't sit well with them, right? Like, so again, we're like coming back to the sort of problem solving orientation of many of our students. That said, we do get a number of students who come to us straight out of undergrad or with few years of experience. And in those cases, I would say lean into what experience you do have, right? Whether that is with internships or whether it is with summer programs, whether it is with practica. We offer practica here, but obviously that's a modality that you see in in an increasing number of institutions. So these might be courses that have a field-based component to it, or maybe even a client-based component where you were doing a project with a client for a client through the sort of supervised, the supervised vehicle of a course. So all of those are really, really great to lean into. Any volunteer work that you've had, any Model UN, whatever, all of those sorts of experiences can help to sort of fill out a picture of where you want to go.
Thank you. This next one, I think I can answer. I'm interested in applying for the Kroc School's concurrent JD MA Peace and Justice. So how do I go about applying? So that application, you apply to the two schools independently. So you apply to the School of Law and to the School of Peace Studies independently. And if you're admitted to both schools, then we work together on the back end to matriculate you first as a 1L at the School of Law, and then year 2 as a full-time MA Peace and Justice student. And then years 3 and 4 of the program would be a hybrid. But the application portion, you are applying independently to both schools. Okay. Let's see, Topher, this might be a good one for you. Do applicants need a clear and conscious social issue that they like to work through when they apply, or is there room to flesh that out throughout the program? Does that hurt your application if you do not?
So the application itself needs you to, it demands that you focus on a social problem. Do we hold your feet to the fire and say, well, you said that you were really interested in the immigration crisis at the US-Mexico border, so you have to study that the whole? No, of course not. What we're interested, we understand that people change their minds. What we're really interested in is identifying the capacity of someone to think rigorously and critically and creatively about a problem. Can you choose its problem, sink your teeth into it, understand it, grapple with it, not come up with facile solutions to it, but really sort of steep yourself in it, and then think through it. Maybe think through to the other side. The ability to do that once is indicative of the ability to do it again, right? And so as they say, right, like plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And I think that, so if you can plan your way to through a one problem, that's indicative of to us, to the admissions committee, that you're going to be able to do it again once you arrive and learn there's something else that's really inspiring for you, or maybe many things that are very inspiring for you, right? That doesn't have to be a unified theory of everything.
Professor Michael Fryer always says, one of my favorite quotes, you won't leave the Croc School with all of the answers, but you'll leave with the right questions. So I think that attitude helps lead you towards that goal. Francis, maybe you can answer this one. How many grad schools would you advise applying to if you're committed to going to grad school next fall?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say don't follow my advice, right? But I think you need to narrow. You can't be too broad in terms of what you're looking at, because that's an indication that you lack some sort of focus, right? So I would say 3 to 4, like identify 3 to 4 schools that you're really interested in, the curriculum, the faculty, and then apply. But I wouldn't say just sort of like, as typical spray and play, and pray and hope, it's not a numbers game. It's more about what you're interested in. Is there alignment? Would it lead you to sort of like career that you're looking for? And so a small focus list, I think it's a good idea.
And a follow-up on that one, what if you're having a hard time between 2 Croc School programs? What do you recommend?
And that happens all the time, right? I think it's worth exploring the curriculum. Start with a curriculum, comparing it, but also talking to faculty. They're very accessible. Professor McDougall is here. He'll talk to you, and all of our faculty. So talk to the faculty about what it means to be a Croc student in a particular program. I would also encourage you. We can connect you with alumni. Current students, so they can share their experiences as well. But again, start with a curriculum and then work your way down to the program advisors, and the faculty, alumni, and students. That may help you kind of distill and come up to, here's where I want to be, and this is the program I want to be in.
And it looks like we have time for one more. Topher, if you would answer this one. I feel like I'm asking a big favor of a mentor with a busy life to sing my praises. What is the best way to respectfully ask / ensure that the letters are substantive and insightful?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. You are asking a lot. It is true, for a real insightful letter, a tailor-made letter. At the same time, I think it's a great opportunity to get in touch with somebody again that maybe you should have been in touch with anyway, or maybe you have been in touch with them. But reach out and grab a coffee or have a conversation with them. I think that any bit of human contact that you can have with that mentor ahead of time, I think will help them understand where you're coming from in applying to this program. I think oftentimes, this is the minority out there. We are the minority. And I have a lot of admiration for our students who have chosen to come to a school of peace studies, right? Like the only standalone school of peace studies in the States. And I think a lot of people look at that and say, well, what is that? What do you do there? Like, because they've seen, I came from economics. My colleagues come from sociology or law or political science. Like everybody knows what those are. And so to give your mentor as full of a picture of what's motivating you as possible, I think it will not only help you think through your own personal statement, but it will also help them think through the letters of recommendation. And honestly, I have never felt used or exploited by a student who's asking for a letter of recommendation, if as long as it doesn't have to feel transactional, right? I'm interested in the well-being and the trajectory of my students after they leave. And so if someone reaches out and says, this is where I am, this is where I'm going, help me think this through, and could you write a letter of recommendation? That's fantastic. There's almost like nothing more gratifying than that as a professor.
Thank you. And I just want to summarize everything before we sign off for the day. Letters of recommendation really do matter. Make sure you get them from people who are confident that will write that strong letter of recommendation. And like Topher said, give plenty of notice and update them on your life. Take your time writing a compelling and authentic personal statement. Don't forget, this is your opportunity to communicate directly with the admissions committee about your experience, goals, and why you want to study at that school. Do your research on the faculty of the school, incorporate what you learned in your application. And I think this is really helpful is don't be afraid to reach out to those faculty members or reach out to people with titles like mine to introduce you to the faculty and begin a dialogue on your shared research interest. Applications have many components, so allow yourself plenty of time to complete them. Give your recommenders plenty of notice to submit their letters, and your bachelor's institution plenty of time to submit your transcripts. And if you're international, plenty of time to submit your transcript credentials through a company like WES. And give yourself plenty of time to write that compelling personal statement and do your research. Last but not least, submit your application as a complete package on time, if not early, and make sure you're hitting all those priority deadlines that the school offers them to be considered for scholarships. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to Francis Laviscount and Professor McDougall for your time tonight. Their email addresses are shared right here on our screen. So you are all welcome to email any of us. We're happy to follow up and be a resource for you. So thank you so much for your time and have a great afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you so much.